Welcome back to the Bring Your Big Energy podcast. Today I have Dr. Alan Mueller with me. Hi, Dr. Alan or Alan.
Hi. It's Alan's great, especially when you say it with like a Midwest accent, like you're from Michigan or something. It's extra great when you say it that way.
Okay, good. Then I'll be having you on the Alan. Yes,
Alan,
I definitely
Alan.
love that. Well, we are so excited to have you on the show today because your story is such a powerful reminder that there's no such thing as a perfect path, only the path that is right for you. So I'm going to
Yeah.
do a little bit of an intro and then I'm going to have you just start telling your story if you're here for it.
Great. I'm ready.
Okay, so we know that you went from struggling in college, taking a minute to graduate with a GPA that was not so sought after. I'll let you actually go into that fun stuff,
Uh-huh.
and then you end up as you are today with us here on the Big Energy Pod, eventually earning not one, not two, but three graduate degrees, which is insane work and so incredible. And you've worked across all kinds of industries. So you've done sales and banking and restaurants and higher ed. And you spent 2 decades really helping to shape leaders and build teams. So we kind of have that in common, which I love, and help
Uh-huh.
people understand how they can actually work better together. Alan is now a senior consultant at Adaptive Challenge Consulting. And this is where he's doing a whole different level of work, where he's helping organizations unlock leadership communication, emotional intelligence in a way that actually sticks. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But what I love about Alan's story is it's not linear at all. It's not polished. It's not predictable. It's full of pivots and failures and reinvention. And that's what we all love here on the show because it's all about multiple intensity points. Can you walk us through your story and the moments that really shaped who you are today?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that intro. So I mean, I think that college was a pretty defining moment for me. I will tell you that in high school, I was a marching band geek, and I
Love.
continue that in college too. So shout out to the band geeks out there. But in college, I was not a good student, and it wasn't that I wasn't smart. It wasn't that I was partying. I was just not interested. I was joining every club you could join, and joining every musical ensemble you could join and whatever. But I wasn't the textbook part and the classes part was not my thing. So it took me 7 years to finish. When I finished, my GPA was 2.16. So these days, when I do keynote speeches and workshops, I say, many of my friends graduated magna cum laude and summa cum laude. I just graduated, thank the laude. Can't believe this dude even made it.
Thank the Lord.
Um,
I love that.
thank the laude. I was working two jobs in college, sometimes even three jobs. And it just, but that failure, that less polished moment gave me empathy that paid off way later in life. So then I did some jobs. I did sales. I worked in a bank for a while. I worked my way up to loan officer. I was helping people with mortgages. And then I applied to graduate school and got rejected because why would a 2.16 GPA, but because I worked at a bank in a small community with a big university, the guy who ran the program that I had applied for, I guess I had helped him at the bank. And he called me up after I got rejected. And he goes, "Hey, saw you got rejected from my grad program." I said, "Well, that's Dr. Clark's program." He goes, "I'm Dr. Clark's boss." And I'm like,
Oh,
"Oh,
okay.
okay." So I think he just remembered that I had treated him kindly at the bank. And also my wife, I got to give some props to my wife. My wife was also getting a graduate degree in sort of a similar department, and he may have known of her. So props to my wife, who's a real trailblazer, and I think helped me get this second chance. Because the guy said, "Hey, we're going to give you provisional status." I said, "I don't know what that is." He goes, "What it means is if you can, we'll let you take a full load of classes, and if you can get a B or better, we'll keep you." And he said, "I looked at your transcript. It seems like by year 6 and 7, you had finally figured it out."
Just
Right?
a minute, right? That's all.
Right, took a while, and he said, "So we're willing to give you a shot." And so that was my first big second chance in life, and that first semester, I got my first ever 4.0 in college. It was a 2-year grad program to get a master's in what's called college student development. If your listeners aren't familiar with that, imagine an MBA for people who wanna work as college administrators. So it's sort of how do you be an administrator at college, but a heavy dose of developmental psychology. Let's read the experience of first generation Latina students at predominantly white urban universities or whatever, whatever, whatever. And so it's sort of half administration and half psychology. And I went in all the way in and got my first ever scholarship. It was $500. It's called the Jones Dodson Scholarship. I'd never had a scholarship in my life. And then just decided to keep going and worked for 20 years in that field, student affairs. So for your listeners who are familiar with how colleges work, Most certainly, there's the stuff in the classroom, but there's a world of stuff outside the classroom. There's the residence halls and the multicultural center and the career center and the fraternity and sorority office and all those things. And somebody has to run all those things and run them in a way that's efficient, that's ethical, that's educational. So that was my field for 20 years. And the cool thing is it's a lot of variety. And literally, if your listeners, you might not believe this, but I've had jobs where I'm running a nightclub owned by a university promoting large scale concerts and drag shows and step shows and contra dances. And then 2 years later, I'm running a career center where we're helping students get to grad school, work on their resumes, prep for job interviews. And so a lot of variety in the field. But the one thing that wove it together, and this sort of speaks to where I am now, the one thing that wove it together is everywhere I went, I started a leadership program. Because if I'm helping students do large scale event planning, they're doing big concerts or movies or, the sort of event planning campus activity stuff. I know that we're doing event planning, but we're also building leaders. And if I'm helping students in the career center with their resumes, getting an internship, getting a study abroad opportunity, I know I'm helping students, but I'm also helping to build leaders. And in all cases, I started a leadership program. Eventually, in 2015, I wrote a dissertation about leadership programs and how universities do leadership programs. And that changed my life. It was life changing. And it's amazing because I got grants to fund all my travel and stuff, which to go from this almost college dropout dude to a guy who's getting money to pay for me to go do research at universities about how they teach leadership was a really, really cool sort of swing. And I don't know that I've ever articulated it that way before.
Yeah.
But went to some awesome places, one in Florida, one in Georgia, one in Washington, DC. And and that sort of sowed the seeds for where I am now because I was constantly doing this leadership development work, mostly with first year students. And I would present about this at conferences, and then a university would say, "Hey, can you come over and teach our students, or can you come teach our faculty or our staff?" And then somebody from a local chamber of commerce would be like, "Oh, you do leadership development? Can you come talk to us?" And then a corporation, and then a nonprofit, and then a K-12 school. And before you know it, my calendar is starting to fill up with this other stuff that's about teaching leadership. And now I do that full time. And so now instead of having a job, and I love, love, love my time in student affairs, but it's a passion job, right? You're working 50 hours a week. Most of my time in that field, I was in some kind of on-call rotation where I was a dean on call where my phone had to be on in case there was a 2 a.m. emergency on the campus, crisis management, all that stuff. To go from that world, which was heavy burnout, it invites burnout, to now, I don't know, 3 days a week, I get to take a nap in the middle of the day. I have a regular gym date with my wife twice a week at 2:30 p.m.
Oh,
Like it's in the daytime where the sunlight is still out. And right, there were times when I'd be working at dance and I wouldn't get home until 2 in the morning, right? And so for the first time in my life, I have work-life balance. And to put it in perspective, I think this quarter I earned as much as I ever earned in a full year working in student affairs. And that's just this quarter. And so it's amazing how these things and the funny thing is too, this was not planned. I didn't get all this education to go, oh, one day I want to be a consultant. No, 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 no. It was all the little twists and turns along the way that led me here.
wow. I mean, there's so I could go so many ways on this, Alan. But I think that there's so much to be said in the here and now. What you just said about yes, earning the amount of income in a quarter than you would have a year, but the naps in the middle of the day or the gym date with your wife. As a retired corporate America, a reformed corporate America person, there's so much to be said about having that flexibility. And I can see the passion for what you are doing and how much you love it. And that is what it's all about. And I think so many people are afraid to take that leap because they don't know the next step to get there. They don't have
Yeah.
the plan. And so they just don't start. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where I want to go back. Let's go back to the start for a minute.
Hmm.
On failure, you said this word failure, and I think that it gets such a bad rap. And I think failure really shapes us in so many ways. So, talk to me about your relationship with the word failure and how it did or did not serve you in your journey.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I think that failure is a teacher. And, I live in North Carolina, and I'm going to be very nonpartisan here. It's so funny because we have one of the biggest rivalries in all of sports, UNC versus Duke,
Yes,
mostly during basketball
very
season.
familiar.
It's like Michigan, Ohio State. It's like, Yankees and Red Sox. It's one of those big level things. And I'm going to be nonpartisan and say two of the best coaches ever are Mike Krzyzewski and Roy Williams. That's a Duke and a UNC. You see, I'm being nonpartisan.
Okay, well
And
done.
so I'm not going to tell anybody what shade of blue I prefer. although I do have a strong preference for one. But let me say this, those coaches, if you look at what they've written, if you look at when they do public speaking, they address failure as though it's just part of the learning process. And if your listeners have heard of the growth mindset, part of this is that, right? We're all going to fail a lot. We're all going to mess up a lot. So we could collectively decide to shame and blame when mess ups happen, or we could decide to reflect and learn when mess ups happen. And
Mhm.
the only reason the shame and blame things happen is because we are conditioned for this. And you know, Stacy, from corporate, that
Mhm.
there's that, but there's a little bit of a turn coming up. Like Google has F up Fridays. I don't
Mhm.
know if I can cuss on your podcast, but they have F up Fridays where they bring execs around the table and they're like, what's the best mistake your team's made this week? Because we want to be a learning organization.
Yeah.
And so leaders or humans that can go, mistakes are part of a learning process. And as long as I'm messing up towards something, it's all good. We should never use it as a crutch. Oh, I messed up all the time because I'm going to mess up all the time. Great. And can you do better from that? Right. And so this, my relationship with failure, I've had so many failures and so many amazing ones. I have kind of a deep one and kind of a funny one. Is there one that you'd rather me talk about more or?
Give me the one that's more interesting to you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I think the one that's a little more interesting to me is I was at the top of my game. I was an assistant dean at a career center. And, career center, we're helping people get jobs every day. At the time, I was also volunteering for this group called Step Up Ministries. They've since changed their name to Step Up Greensboro because they don't want to seem too churchy. It's supported by our faith community, but it's very open. It's very ecumenical and wide open. But Step Up, its mission is to help out of work adults. So by day, I'm helping young adults get employment. And then when I'm volunteering, I'm helping other adults in the community get employment. Step Up eventually invited me to be on their board. And I said, boards are for old rich people. I'm not old or rich. And they're like, well, we want diversity. And I'm like, diversity? I'm a white dude. Like, what are you talking about? Right. But they thought of me as youthful or I don't know what. So I even agreed to be on their board. So fast forward to it's 12 days before new board member orientation for a nonprofit whose mission it is to help out of work adults. I'm running a career center at this college where I help adults get jobs, and I got laid off.
Perfect.
I got laid off.
Wow.
And there's another little twist to it because, first of all, God, the universe, whatever makes sense of all of this, was definitely ready to take me down a peg because, I was at the top of my game, had just gotten my doctorate a couple of years ago, ran a team that was getting all of our numbers and all the things.
Yeah.
And two other things that are random and interesting is about 4 years prior to this, I started this project where I wanted to visit every college in our state. We have 51 colleges in North Carolina.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
very, very fortunate to have a lot, 16 publics and like 30, however many leftover private colleges. And over 2 years, I visited every single one of them. And it was a really cool trip. I was trying to help a professional association get more members, but then I was also doing some research. I would interview the dean of students or the vice president, whoever their main student affairs person was. So I did that for 2 years and I met all these amazing people along the way. So fast forward again to when got laid off. I'm sitting on the couch. I told my wife, who's a counselor, I said, I'm going to give myself one whole day of self pity, one whole day, just a whole day. And I'm not a big drinker, but I'm like, Amy, I'm going to have 2 drinks today, 2 whole drinks. Ooh. Right. And self pity. I'm like, and then tomorrow I'm going to roll up my sleeves and get to work on finding my next job. And so the next day I'm sitting there, notepad, laptop, and I'm like, I don't know where to start. I've been helping people for decades who've either lost their jobs or in college about to get jobs. I've been helping thousands of people get employment. And when it comes to me, where I know my imperfections, I know my insecurities, I know my fears, I got that little devil on the shoulder. I call him Bob. And then I've got the good one over here. I know all of the inner workings of Alan and I don't know where to start. And I said to my wife, I said, I don't know where to start. And she looks at me with this little smile. She goes, don't you know every single dean of students in the state of North Carolina? So I called my favorite one up that wouldn't require us to relocate, that was kind of in our community, called her up. She said, I'm so sorry you lost your job. 2 days later, she called me and hired me.
Wow. What a power.
Yeah.
And that is such a power of a network. I teach a whole master class on networking. I feel like it's
Yes.
my jam. I love, love, love everything about networking. Um, and so you had two of these moments. I mean, lots of moments, but there are two that I'm bringing together right now. One is when you weren't sure that you were going to get into grad school with the two, but the guy from the bank took a chance on you.
Yep.
And then you
Yeah.
have this other beautiful story where this dean of students in your local community that you knew again, hires you right off the bat. So, what is it about the power of network that they could take away and learn from you?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. And so, Stacy, in a minute, I would love to tell you the story of my twin in Kansas. So I would love to put a
Yes.
pin in this.
Yes.
But when it comes to networking, my approach is a little bit backwards. It's a little bit flipped. And so, and it's, again, I used to run a career center and I used to teach the elevator pitch. I used to teach, how do you manage a LinkedIn, all of those things for conventional networking. My belief is I want to find cool people and make connections. And the thing that makes me a little bit different is I think that when we think about networking, a lot of people think, oh, I want to get in front of the person with the most influence in the room and make my pitch to them, or the person with the most power in the room to get me somewhere and make my pitch to them. I kind of do it backwards. I look at who is in this room, who's up and coming, who 5 years from now is going to be the most powerful person in the room. Who
Oh,
10 years from now is going to be the most influential person in the room. And can I network with them and pour into them because maybe they're earlier in their journey? They might look at me as some kind of mentor or co-mentor or something like that. Could I find individuals that I really believe in that I think are the future ones that everyone's going to be clamoring to, and can I connect with them, right? Not network with them, because to me, when I say network, it sort of boils down to being transactional. I give you something, you give me something.
yeah,
But
it's a
but
yucky word. It's a yucky word
no,
for sure.
but connecting, I can connect with this person, and maybe the connection goes somewhere, and maybe it doesn't. But yeah, so I'm a little bit of a reverse networker, um, and I met this amazing my twin in St. Louis. Can I tell you a random story
Yeah,
about
is it
this?
an
About
actual twin or is it like a doppelganger?
yeah, not it was ish. So
Okay.
I and this is again a moment of failure that turned into something awesome. I had applied for another job at another university, and I was at Disney World when I found out I didn't get it. I was at Disney World on family vacation when I found out I didn't get it. Now, the truth is, the person who beat me out is actually a dear friend of mine, and that person who beat me out is a lot better of a fit for that university. That university was a little bit too preppy for me, and they knew it and I knew it. And my friend is fits, right? Anyway, so I'm at Disney, get the bad news, it could have ruined my vacation. But that day I had lunch reservations at a little spot in Disney World. And I go to check in, and the person behind the counter, the Disney cast member behind the counter says, "Are you a party of three or a party of four?" I said, "I'm a party of four." And they said, "And your name is Alan Mueller." I'm like, "Yes, Alan Mueller." And next to me, there's a woman checking in with the other Disney cast member. And they're like, "Are y'all together?" And I'm like, "No, no, no, we're not together." Her name is Elena Mueller.
Oh my gosh,
It's
how crazy.
ALO, it gets crazier. It gets crazier. So we laugh, haha, small world after all. She's a party of three. I'm a party of four. We take a picture, yada, yada. She goes to her table. I go to my table. She looks me up on Facebook. I look her up on LinkedIn. She's a career coach. And I'm like, okay, this is getting weirder.
I
And
literally have goosebumps right now,
I
like,
know,
that's
I know.
crazy.
I know. And my family knows that I have a little bit of an obsession with coffee. And then I find out that her first book is called about networking is called Coffee Lunch Coffee. And I'm like, oh
Of
my
course it is.
gosh, stop it, universe, stop it. And so we've gotten together since then. Like on the funny thing is on Facebook, we'll wish each other happy birthday. We'll be like, happy birthday, sis, happy birthday, brother or cousin or whatever. She had like a great aunt go, I didn't know you had another brother or something like that. So Elena Mueller, and again, this was within like an hour and a half of me getting this news that I didn't get this job. Talk about the universe winking and being like, "Yup, yup, you're good. It's there's some bigger path switch here it's just time for, and just it's okay." So I've had so many of those instances that yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
Well, but you have to be open to them as well. You have to be aware of what the abundance is, even in the hardest of days, which
Yeah,
is not always easy for
it's
sure.
not.
It's
It's
not always
not.
easy. Okay, you said the word path, which is great because I had put a pin in that word for you. People think you have a path. People think you have a plan. I mean, that's what happens to me. I thought I had a path, I had a plan, and I went like this for 48 years, and I didn't fail for 48 years, really. And then at 48, I failed really what felt horrible to me. It wasn't really, but it felt like a huge failure. I was kind of destroyed that my path was gone. I was just, what
Yeah.
am I doing? This is what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to be a vice president, a sales leader, all this stuff. I am so happy that it fell apart because I am literally living my best life as you are doing all the things I love. That being said, I love that you've done these twists and turns and sales and healthcare and education. How do you think about the variety of life versus
Yeah.
a plan?
Yeah, and I mean, so one thing I do a lot of work with groups is about the Myers-Briggs type indicator and our personalities. And without getting too technical about it, there are people who need a plan and love a plan. And for them, I think a plan is a valuable thing. And then there are people who need You know, like a choose your own adventure book. I don't know if many of your
I
listeners are
love those books. Remind the
old enough.
listeners what that book is in case they don't.
Yeah, yeah. So if you were born, after maybe 1985, maybe, you might not know of these, but they were books, and you would read like 2 pages, and you're with your friend following a witch into the woods or something like that, and you get to page 4, and it says, "You see the witch go around the corner. Turn to page 8 if you follow her. Turn to page 15 if you don't." And you turn to a different page, and it takes you to a different outcome. So it's this sort of interesting forking upon forking upon forking of stories. And the thing is, you could reread the book. And when you reread the book, you could get a different outcome. You could choose a different outcome.
Yes.
So it's called choose your own adventure. And so I think that some of us, a plan is very helpful, and really putting together a plan. And then some of us, it's better to understand that your life is a choose your own adventure book and not be scared by it and not be limited by a plan. Instead, I advocate sort of micro plans, like a little plan here, a little plan there. There's a great satirist, comedian, Broadway star, who wrote the musical Matilda.
Yeah.
And his name right now is escaping me. Oh my gosh! And he made one of the best graduation speeches ever. And he said, "I advocate that you all be micro ambitious. Find something that you're passionate about right now and just go all in. But don't build too many plans because the next cool thing might be in your periphery." Right. And I'm like,
Mm.
oh yeah. He calls it micro ambitious. And I'm like, I'm an ENFP in Myers-Briggs. I may or may not have undiagnosed ADD. I don't know, but what I do know is that being open to things, following your passions, and I know that sounds cliche, and every time I say it, but the things that get you most excited, find ways to build around that. Find ways to capitalize on that, to use that as a springboard. Find the things that you really, really love, and then find a place for them. I have a guy who I'm trying to convince to work with my company up in Michigan, and he does some consulting work, and he said, I'm so exhausted by trying to explain this to the people I'm in rooms with, explain what I'm trying to do with my consulting. I said, dude, then you're in the wrong rooms. In
Yeah.
some rooms, and because he and I had both worked in student affairs, so I gave him this one sentence. I said to him, I said, Eric, I said, hey, after we do the program for orientation, can we do a pre-post on the assessment with a qualitative, quantitative mixed measures, and then make sure and report out to the dean? And he's like, yeah, 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 I get all that. I'm like, yeah, that's jargon, dude. That's jargon. Not everybody gets that sentence I just said, but
Right.
you and me we're in that bubble. So
Yep.
now, dude, the thing that you're saying it in the wrong places. There's a bubble somewhere where the things you're saying, and he was focusing on high school students transitioning to college and college students transitioning to post college, and both together, which is a weird sell, and it's a little different, but it's transitions. And
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, if you're exhausted by having to explain it to different people, because there's someone somewhere for whom it won't be exhausting. You'll just say it and they'll be like, yeah, I get it, dude. I get exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
yeah.
so true. I was with you because I work with a ton of universities, so I was like, "Oh, I got you. I just did 2
You
of those on
you you
Friday."
you
Uh,
got it.
okay, so this is so fascinating. So if we come back to our choose your own adventure book,
Yes.
the writer tells you when to choose that next fork.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In your life with the diversification of the different things and find something you're passionate about, how did you decide when to turn the page to a different place?
Oh my gosh. I wish I could say that usually it was conscious, but I'll tell you an interesting thing, because when my consulting company started in 2014, and that was just the point where I was getting enough business where I'm like, this should be a thing. And then I was laid off. I think it was 2016 or 2017. The fact that I can't remember is huge. Like my first year of therapy, I very much remember the day, the moment, whatever. And I'm like, I think it was 2016 or 2017. I can't exactly remember. But I had that company, and when I got laid off, I was scared. My fear was I was scared. I had a mortgage and 2 kids, and I had this paycheck, and I was scared. And so I put all this energy into my consulting company, advertising it, connecting with friends. Hey, help me get clients. And it went nowhere. It went nowhere. And I don't under people who say that they can manifest things. I'm fascinated by that and jealous of that. And I think I understand part of it. What I do know is that as I was doing those things out of fear, it wasn't really clicking.
Yeah.
Fast forward to I get a job at the next college, and it's 30 minutes away from that first college. This job, first 2 years are the happiest of my life in my profession. And then after those 2 years, the college went through some transition. And then I said, what if instead of out of fear, when I had been laid off, trying to get the consulting company to be big enough by itself, what if this time, out of just love and joy and passion, while I still have a job, I started getting ready for that transition, and that's when it happened, and that's when everything took off. And you know, again, the people who talk about manifesting things, I don't exactly understand how that all works, right? I do know that if you and I start talking about white Hondas for the rest of this podcast, and then I go out later, I'm going to see all the white Hondas, right? I do know that part, right?
Yes.
And I do know that the things I pour passion into somehow come back in ways that I don't always understand or don't know or aren't on my time. But people who just say, oh, I'm just going to manifest that like consciously. I'm like, I bless your heart, friend. I would love to learn how to just do that because then I can retire. But
Yeah.
I do understand, I think, parts of what makes that work. And so, for me at least, when I was operating out of fear, and again, I know this sounds cliche, and your listeners have probably heard this on dozens of podcasts. But when I was operating out of fear, things weren't clicking. I think that the fear showed up in each email I wrote. The
Mm.
fear and the anxiety about paying my bills showed up in some kind of desperation in my language or something. Fast forward to 5 years later, I have a job. I'm being conscious about making the shift on my terms. And that probably showed up in the emails too when I would connect with people. And so it's probably seeped through my subconscious, the fear versus the love and the joy and the passion.
It's so true. It's 100% true. I just did this keynote where I talked about confidence. And if you don't believe that you're supposed to be in the room can feel it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
tell
yeah.
yourself these stories, and the stories lead to thoughts and feelings and actions. And that's how you show up. So you're telling yourself crappy stories, then you're going to show up crappy. Like it just is. And so
Yeah.
fear is fascinating to me. Fear, everyone's like, are you writing another book? If I ever write another development book, it will
Uh,
be around fear because I do
oh, yeah.
believe if
Yep.
you can overcome fear,
Mhm.
literally, you're unstoppable because
Yeah.
that's honestly the only thing in your way, and so, on the flip side of what I heard you say, which I love, my business partner and I always talk about, we don't chase, we attract. We
Right.
don't chase, we
Right.
attract, and so if you
Yeah.
think that that abundance is gonna come your way, it always does. It might not look perfect, it might not be so obvious every single time, it might come on the backside of failure, it might
Yep.
come on the backside of a lost account, that you didn't really realize that you didn't wanna have, but now here you are, and so I think there's so much to be said about that. And again, it goes back to this openness.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too with the doing what we love and passions is this word purpose. So in my book, we have the spark process, which is self-reflection, purpose, abandon, results, and kinetic energy. And so the
Mhm.
P is purpose.
Mhm.
How do you think about your life's work and your purpose?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, and thank you for, I'm glad that that's in your book because that was part of my experience, even though I didn't have words for it for a long, long time. And so when I was in student affairs, my purpose was to uplift students and train student leaders. And so that made me a little bit of an enigma within the field because they're like, oh, isn't your purpose residence halls, or isn't your purpose career centers, or isn't your purpose admissions, or isn't your purpose? And I'm like, well, no, no, no. The purpose could fit into any of those containers, but the purpose is building leaders. And so that the world is built out of containers, right? The world wants check boxes and containers, right? And so this was one of the challenges in a way, but I accidentally just forged my own path because my purpose was that. And then now my purpose is building leaders, mid-level managers, executives, and emerging leaders, but mostly in teams. And this is where you and I, our work is different. I really don't do coaching. Every once in a while, if I've got like a team and there's a few squeaky wheels on the team, I'll get out the old coaching hat and but that's not what my company does. You
Mhm.
can't just call us up and say, I need coaching, right? I'm gonna be like, no, call Stacy for that,
I
right?
was gonna say, send
But
them my way, bro. Feel free.
go over to Stacy, right? But when it's a group or when it's a team, that my passion is, can I get this team to leave the room a little more cohesive, a little more understanding, a little more empathetic towards each other, a little bit more effective in communicating with each other? Can I leave a team a little better on those different dynamics? And the reality is, now from experience, and I know that I can, and I know that I have gifts that under most circumstances I can get a group further. And so that lights me up. And one of the other things is the aha moments. And I'm sure as a coach, this is probably where our work is more similar. A lot of times when I'm doing a keynote, I put up the FedEx logo and I show people that in the negative space between and this is a spoiler, everybody, but in the negative space between that orange E and the orange X, in that negative space is an arrow. In the negative space, it forms an arrow that's moving to the right. And Stacy, I'm going to be honest with you, 25 to 33% of every audience I address, sometimes as much as half, has never noticed the arrow.
Mhm.
It's everywhere and they've never noticed it. And so I say to them, I'm like, my hope is, first of all, I say, folks who just noticed the arrow, I got good news and bad news. The good news is you've seen the arrow. The bad news is you've seen the arrow.
You can't unsee it. Right.
There's no unseeing it. You can't close your eyes and go la 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 and then open your eyes and suddenly not see it. No, it's there. And my hope is that when we're doing these workshops together and when I'm teaching them active listening or I'm teaching them about their personality types in the office, that they have an aha moment that they can never, ever un-aha, right? Just like a FedEx arrow moment. And so I'm sure that with coaching, and I'm thinking back to when I used to do coaching more regularly, I do remember some of those aha moments that a client would have, and they're like, "Oh, this is the thing in my way,"
Oh,
right?
it's the best
Yeah.
because they're the moment that the client thinks you did it for them, and you're like, "Oh, no,
No,
sis.
no, 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 no,
You
no,
just
no.
unlocked level 7. That
Correct.
was you. I just created the container for it to happen."
I set up the room. I lit a candle. I got us the smelly markers in the paper.
Yeah.
But you set the vision. Yeah, you did it. Yeah,
I love
yeah,
that. I love
yeah.
that. So I'm picturing you on your journey. For some reason, you've got a backpack. I don't know why, Alan, but let's just say you do.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
But you're going all these different places. You can't just keep putting more and more into the backpack. So you're getting more degrees and you're going and you're trying out different industries. Somewhere along the way, you've got to get things out of that bag. You've got to abandon things. You've got to
Mhm.
let things go.
Yeah,
Whether there's stories or items or skills. What have you had to abandon as my A
yeah,
in my Spark process? What have you
yeah.
had to abandon along the way to be as successful as you are today?
Well, there are two things. One is I remember vividly when I started my doctoral program. I even though I was in student affairs, which was part fun and games, part crisis management. I always taught a little bit. I would teach like a first year seminar class or a career class, and I loved teaching a class. And when I sat down at orientation for my doctorate, they said, "You're going to have to give something up for the next 2 years." And I gave up teaching. And that was one thing I gave up. But then when I left my old profession where I got to uplift sort of student leaders and had student interaction, and I'll tell you, it was an honor, a special honor and a special privilege to be able to sit with students sometimes in their darkest moments when they had lost a loved one or they had been the victim of violence or something, and in their most joyous moments when they got into grad school and when they got the job they wanted and when they got a student leadership award and get it was such a privilege for 20 years to be in those moments with students, and I do miss that some
Mm.
because, it's special because you meet the students where they are, and because I had failed at college a lot, I had a lot of empathy because my road was not linear. It gave me a wealth of empathy for them that I did not know at the time was going to help fill other people up. And my last college in particular, I'm a diehard feminist and womanist, and my last college in particular was the oldest women's college in the country, founded in 1772, the oldest continuously operating women's college in the country, I should say. And finishing my student affairs career in that space was everything I could have asked for. It was the right way to end that chapter of my life because being around those women in that environment that empowered them in a certain way that's hard for me to put into words, but that I very, very much recognize was the best send off I could have had. Yeah.
Mhm. That's so good. It's interesting because you're making me think of something that goes back to the writing world, which is a Stephen King thing, which is called Kill Your Darlings. And so they have you write this entire book and they're like, okay, now take out 3 stories. I'm like, wait, I love those stories. No, take out 3 stories. And so
Yeah.
things have to be left on the cutting room floor. And I think when we talk about
Yeah.
abandoning things that we
Yeah.
can't carry because we're reinventing ourselves, oftentimes people assume we're abandoning bad things. But the reality is, it's not always things that we want to
Yeah.
abandon. So in your
Yeah.
case, it's teaching. I work a ton with physicians, and those physicians, they to become more administrative, to go from a scrub to a suit, in my words, and they need to have less clinical time, less patient time to open up the administration time. But they love the patient time, so it's really this hard thing. So when you think about that, how have you made that decision in your career, and what can you help the listeners with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing is that letting go of good things, letting go of bad things, letting go to make space is letting go to make space. I think, be honest with yourself and just like in medicine, in higher ed, it was the same thing. When you were an assistant director, everything you did was students. When you were an associate director, the same. Then you become a director and more than half your job's budgets and personnel and
Right.
strategic planning and development and all these things. Then you become a dean and if you don't carve it out, you don't have any student interaction. And so I think that in general, I think that you got to be honest with yourself about what you can do without. But also, sometimes we think that those good things are the reason, right? Remember earlier you asked about purpose, and I said
Yeah.
purpose was building up leaders, and the way I thought about it then was building up leaders who are college students. But building up leaders is a purpose that our college students is a modifier to my purpose. It's not the actual purpose. And I thought that it was the same, and it's not. It's not.
Yeah.
The things that I love doing, the things that I do, I mean, I was just in Indiana working with 120 mid-level managers at a global trucking company, and the things I do are surprisingly similar to what I was doing with 18 and 19-year-olds at a women's college, right?
Mhm.
In terms of how do you really, and so I think that that part of it in the discernment process for your listeners is understanding that you might have to give up a setting, or you might have to give up a modifier. You might have to give up the version of this passion that you're talking about, but you don't have to give up the passion itself, right? This
Yeah.
passion may have expressed itself and found you in a K-12 setting. It found you in a corporate setting, found you in a nonprofit setting. It could find you anywhere, but if you could peel it back enough, if you could peel the setting back, is there something about that passion that goes beyond, that goes to other settings, or that crosses between settings, or that doesn't even care about the containers and the settings, right? Some people say to me, "Oh, shouldn't you have a niche? Shouldn't you just work with higher ed people or corporate people or nonprofit people?" I'm like, Leadership's leadership, my friend. We're all thirsty for leadership. There are bad managers and bad leaders everywhere. So I don't know what you're asking me, right? I hear
Right.
you.
Right.
It's like, well, you need to pick, and I'm like, I I don't know if I believe that. I mean, I guess for some people it might be valuable. For me, it has not been. Yeah.
Well, and I love this leveling up, like up to this 30,000-foot view. I've reinvented myself over and over again, but with Bring Your Big Energy, I'm like, my whole thing is I'm in the business of experience creation. Whether I'm
Yes.
coaching you one on one, or I'm on stage in front of 200 people, or you're hearing me in your ears through my audiobook, or watching you and I right now on YouTube.
Uh,
No matter
yep.
what it is, I want to create this experience that is inspiring and empowering for people. So I
It's
absolutely agree with that.
It's huge, and I'll mention there's this great author named Thomas Friedman, and if you wanna read, your listeners, his book is called The World is Flat. He won a Pulitzer Prize for it. I mean, he's a big time guy,
Yeah.
and he makes economics make sense to people like me who have no background in economics whatsoever. But he talked about the experience. He said, "Disney's not selling movies or theme parks, they're selling an experience." He said, "Apple, they're not selling phones, they're selling an experience."
Yeah.
There's certain folks, there's certain entities out there that understand an experience. And there's another, oh my gosh, I love, and you've probably seen this, Leadership According to the Dancing Guy, the TED Talk.
Oh,
Lo
yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And it's about, even though the video says it's about quote unquote leadership, the voiceover over and over again says, if you care and want to start a movement, he says movement, movement, movement. But he's describing experience. The
Yes.
experience of somebody turns on the music, someone's the first dancer, someone's the first follower of the first dancer, someone's the second follower. And then this thing, and I don't want to spoil it for your listeners, but watch Leadership According to the Dancing Guy. It's a powerful, powerful metaphor. But Stacey, like you're saying, it's about creating the environment, right? Like I said, just to put a pin in this all the way back, my master's degree was in what we called college student development.
Okay.
And all of us left that master's degree thinking, how can we go develop students? And I was one of the ones, thankfully, because I was a little older, and I said, I don't think we can develop students. I think we can make the conditions right for them to develop themselves.
Oh,
And that's
yeah.
that's the secret right there, is if we think we can develop them, whatever that means, we're going to be frustrated and exhausted and tired. But if we think, I'm going to create environments that are conducive to the development, experiences that are conducive to the development, Stacey, I think you and I both know that's where the magic happens. And
Oh, so true.
that's what we can do. That's what we actually can do. Yeah.
It's so true. I just hired for myself, because every coach should have a good coach. The type of coach I hired now is a health and wellness coach, and so I just met with her yesterday, and I left the call saying to my husband, like, I know a lot of the stuff we were talking about, but she kind of forced me into this, like, let's give it a range, let's give it a name, let's give it a, and creating that space so that then I can develop my own habits, which I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Everybody
Right.
does on a lot of these things. Go ahead. In terms of what we're supposed to be doing, I come to the R in Spark. So the results. So you've built this business focused on leadership, which we've talked a lot about, communication, and then group transformation, which it really is. So what do you think? What do you believe most people or teams are getting wrong when it comes to being able to work well together?
Yeah, so I think that one of the big problems is the way we think about leadership. And I think that so much that's left over from the Industrial Revolution. And, I do this a lot. As a matter of fact, I'm doing this afternoon with some people where I'm going to talk about Rosie the Riveter for a second. Y'all remember Rosie the Riveter? And And Rosie the Riveter was a symbol not just of women doing welding, but it was a symbol of this big shift in the workforce in World War II. Not to get too academic, but give me 10 seconds. In World War II, between the GI Bill and women entering all these new sectors after World War II, our workplaces were so much more diverse, and yet they were still working with Industrial Revolution norms set by white dudes. And I'm not saying those norms are all bad, but they were very incomplete for the moment. And we've been, for the last 70 years, we've been peeling those back a little bit. All you got to do is turn on an episode of Mad Men to see what culture was like in business in the 50s and
Yeah.
how culture, thankfully, now has grown, but it's been a slow process. It's not like people called time out and changed culture, right? So because of that, there's this idea that leadership is a might makes right. It's a top down, it's a hierarchical process. And friends, it is no longer that process. And right now we are in, probably especially since about 2008, we've been in this new experiment zone where the old ideas of leadership, of the boss says that I do it, the boss says that I do it, top down, linear, to collaborative leadership, leaders who listen to their teams, leaders who think laterally, leaders who are humble about their own culture and curious about other cultures, those kinds of folks who aren't afraid, who embrace failure as a part of what it means to learn and grow and be a learning organization. And so we're in this shift right now. So what I think a lot of organizations get wrong is they think our culture is this way because that's how leadership is. It's a top down thing. And they don't understand, no, if you get in a room together, you can create your culture together moving forward. And this is the big problem. They think that culture is outside of themselves because when they come to work, when they first start, they're always your first day is always your first day and everyone else there has already been there. So
Mhm.
you assume the culture is set. And then the next person's first day, that happens again. And then we all just keep assuming that our cultures are set instead of going, could we take hold of our culture? Could we sit down with a facilitator and figure this out, how to make our culture intentional? And in that process, make our culture more inclusive. A lot of people start DEI stuff with, well, let's talk about the history of race and let's talk about this. And that. I'm like, yes, that's good stuff to talk about. Yes. And what about making sure that every voice in your current team has a voice at the table when you talk about how you work together and what counts as professional? What if we started there? We
Yeah.
can start there and then build out, because if all the voices are in, instead of just these echoes of the Industrial Revolution of what's like, if you look, sorry for the, but if you look at a lot of different lists of emotionally intelligent leadership, a lot of the lists include managing your emotions.
Yeah.
Well, let me just tell you, friend, I think if women had been in charge of the Industrial Revolution, that would not be something that we would consider part of leadership now. It wouldn't be. The Harvard Business Review, on their list of leadership traits, charisma, this and that, they include tallness and physical appearance as parts of leadership. I'm like, that is so I'm 6'2". That never has that made me a better leader
Right.
because I bump my
I'm
head on more
5'1" and I was
things.
a hell of a leader. I'm just saying.
Exactly, exactly. I have known so many vertically challenged, amazing
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah.
And so, like, but it's a remnant of, whether it's like managing your emotions or whatever, it's a remnant of kind of a dudes only version of leadership that was very hierarchical. And I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying 100% of that stuff is bad. I'm saying it's just incomplete, and some of it's definitely bad. In the 50s and 60s, calling women sweetie and honey and whatever at work. Oh my gosh, friends, I'm so glad we're past most of that.
Mhm.
My hope is we're past most of that. But but there are parts that just need refreshing and need shaking up. And we, every organization you're part of, you're part of building that culture. Most of the time, it's what I call the accidental cultural collage. Most companies are an accidental collage of culture. And working with me, they can go from an accidental collage to an intentional collage, right? Where
Yeah.
they have a clearer picture together of what they count as professional, what they count as respectful, what they count as empathetic, etc. So I think the biggest thing companies and groups get wrong is buying into hierarchical leadership and all the shame and guilt and all the bad stuff that comes with that. Yeah,
So if you're this you're listening right now and you're the mid-level person and you're not
yeah,
the actual leader and
yeah,
I mean, we're even coming to places too where like the 23-year-old's the boss of like the 45-year-old. Like there's all this stuff that's happening, good, bad, diversification, like all the things. So
yeah, yeah.
I do think, and this is a little cliche, but leader, you can lead at any level. But what advice do you give someone if they're like, look, I want to actually have some input. I'm not actually the guy in charge, but I
Mhm.
don't think that this is going the way that the team needs it to be going. What's your advice
Yeah.
to them?
Oh my gosh. So I do a lot on managing up, because a lot of the groups I work with, even though I work with C-suite folks my passion is mid-level folks, and my other passion is like emerging leaders, the people who aren't even yet at mid-level management that companies are like, we need to pour into.
Yeah.
So this managing up thing is something. So for one, it's get curious, get curious, get curious. Ask questions. I come from the Quaker tradition. We call them queries, where there's a leader who's going a different direction. Question them a lot, but question in a seeking to understand, not an adversarial way. Again, that hierarchical leadership, that might makes right thing, is very much any question is a threat. No, no, no. Go in. Hey, boss, look, I know we're going this direction. I'm really confused. There are things that I don't know if make sense to me. Can you help them make sense to me? This part of the project, if it were me, I'd be doing it this way, and I know you're doing it this way, and I'm going to support you because this is where we're going. But help me understand this better, because right now I'm having this tension because it's not the way I would go. So you notice in that phrase I'm saying, I'm getting my ego out of it, sort of. And this is the hard part. This is the hard part.
Yeah.
It's hard for all of us. And because my second grad degree was in adult development, I can tell you psychologically, it's harder for the men out there to men start working on your egos now, my friends. Women have perfected this. Women are typically about 30 years ahead of us in this process at any given time. So the surrendering of your ego and the not getting so bunched up with your ego that it's going to disrail you. Not that people of all genders don't have ego, but in adult men psychological development, our ego gets embedded in us in a different way, which is harmful. So you got to let go of that. With instead of this is the way I should do it, and the boss is doing it differently, you got to be like, I'm going to pretend like it's my first day at work and I really don't understand anything, and I want you to help me understand and make them articulate it. And then as you go, you can share. Have you thought of it this way? Have you thought of it this way? Questions are less threatening.
Yeah.
And so investigating, but more than just asking the questions, getting in the mindset of maybe asking yourself, do you actually know everything you think you need to know to weigh in on this? Because maybe the supervisor knows something you don't know,
Right.
maybe,
Right.
or maybe they don't, and your question is going to unlock something for them. Yeah,
It's so true, and it all comes back to that, growth mindset that we talked about in the beginning.
it does. It
Someone once
does.
said to
And
me,
yeah.
I don't I'm this is the thing I also do on the show, I butcher all the quotes, that's my
Oh,
thing.
yeah, of course.
Right. And, but, like, don't just show up interesting, show up interested, and I
Oh
love
my
that. I'm like, "Oh, that's so
gosh.
good."
And on that note, in the internet age, curiosity is taking a hit, y'all. Curiosity is
Love
taking a hit
it.
because we can internet search anything, and so but you can't internet search people's experiences. And so if you have a supervisor, coworkers, people that you are leading, ask them questions, get curious, learn about what they consider home, learn about just the things that make them human,
Yeah,
because those things aren't internet searchable. And it reminds us that before the internet, I've lived in the world before the internet. Stacey, I'm sure you did too.
I did.
My cu I was just way, way, way more curious then than I am now, because I would sit at dinner and we'd argue about who was that actress in that movie, and there was no way to break the tie if you and your spouse or you and your friends are arguing, "Who was
Right,
that actor? Who was that actress?" You would just have to not know,
right.
and that left curiosity alive. As to now, we can just go click, 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 "Oh, no, yeah, that was Scarlett Johansson. Okay, cool." And
Yeah.
so that hurts our curiosity. So I'm saying to your listeners, foster curiosity. Get curious about everything you can get curious about.
Love that. That's so good. Okay, we are at the end of our time together. I'm going to put all of your links in the show notes, but as we have parting words, where can people kind of check you out and find more about you?
The easiest way is to find Alan Mueller on LinkedIn and find Adaptive Challenge Consulting on LinkedIn. Adaptive Challenge Consulting is also on Facebook and Instagram. And visit our website. I've got some cool books that are about teen leadership. One of them is Improv Comedy and the Art of Leadership, because I
Oh,
used to be an improv comedian for 10 years.
I love
Uh,
that.
Yep. And then the other one is leading with emotional intelligence. And so both of these books are available on my site. They're also on big retailers like Amazon and some local bookstores as well. But yeah, I mean, Adaptive Challenge Consulting on LinkedIn and Alan Mueller on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect.
Yeah. And shout out to the authorship because just for the listeners, buy it on his website. Don't buy it on Amazon. We get like $1 for each book on Amazon. So not a rant, but like help support the cause over there. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You have been such a joy to hang out with today. And I feel like everyone's going to be able to take so many good nuggets from your path. So thank you for joining us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stacey, so much.
Thanks.